Well, hi, I'm Karen, aka the Black Visual Queen. I am a photo director, photo art director, producer. Kind of a little bit of backstory of me. I got into photography for being quote unquote, the family photographer for family vacation. And I kind of fell in love with photography really when I took a class in my last year of high school, and we were literally in a janitor's closet, and the magic of photography came to life that day. Fast forward, went to school to photography, but I always knew that I personally necessarily couldn't do the hustle of being a photographer, or that wasn't like my skill set or passion. I love photography. I love studying about it. But me being an actual photographer, other than for personal work or kind of fine art reasons, that just anything else kind of just wasn't resonating. And it wasn't until I did an internship after I graduated with my master's at SCAD, doing a photo internship for a magazine or custom publishing, what it was called back then, for ink publishing in London. And that's where I kind of fell into kind of the other, like kind of like the backside of photography, where I'm in position of being a photo art director and producer, where I hire photographers and I help bring visuals to life through magazines or publications for brands, magazines for tech. And so kind of my career, I started on the editorial side of, this kind of photo kind of world of producing and working at Southern Living, AARP, Wired, Barron, kind of the whole gamut. And now kind of for the last few years been located in LA, but I was in San Francisco for 6.5 years, kind of going into this tech. I was working for Apple, working for Square, now Netflix, but mainly found my passion of like being able to create and work with amazing artists like yourselves and photographers and illustrators and just kind of all around the world, and being able to produce work where I can see it on a cover of a magazine, I can see it in a feature, I can see it on a billboard, see it online on advertisements and stuff like that. So it was a very hard learning curve, but for me, it's been such a rewarding career. But I'm here, you can pick my brain. I am here, an open book, and any questions you have about like the industry or just how to get started or kind of anything creative.
So what do you think? I'm gonna stick. I'm gonna stay on this computer where you can't actually see me.
Okay.
Because it's not going to be back on this one, on this mic. So what do y'all got? Some questions? Anybody have something on top of your head? I have questions, but I know her from SCAD. We went to graduate school together. So yeah, how do you go from, Wired and Barron's and AARP and Ink Magazine? How do you get from point A to point B?
Again, I always say like I'm an anomaly of like for my career, because literally I think when you want to be on this side of being a producer or art director or creative director, I literally fell into it and kind of had to learn on the fly. But to go to these different magazines, kind of as a photographer, if you want to, like, I use the example, you say you're a photographer and you fell in love with food photography and you want to shoot for those top brands and you want to shoot for those top, publications. You build and curate a portfolio that speaks to those brands that you want to be working for as a food photographer. So on my end, I am building a portfolio, going from Wired, a lot of portraits, a lot of feature work, to city magazines where join local restaurants and mom and pop stuff. You build a portfolio that curates, or you build a portfolio and curate it that is speaking the love language of who you're wanting to work with. Because on the other side, people wanting to hire you, they want to see that they want that social proof that you can do what they're wanting you to do for their brand.
That's, if you recall, Alan Cooley is still working here in Atlanta.
Yep.
And one of the things that he told us when he had visited was that he tried to, he looked at New York and looked at Chicago, but he couldn't find his niche there. And what he did was got active here in Atlanta. He picked hair and beauty, hair and makeup, picked it and built a portfolio around that work and became extremely successful. And it sounds like what you're telling them is to pick something like sports.
I always say, and I feel like sometimes it's not hot enough, I always go back when I'm coaching or teaching. I tell photographers, like, understand your why first of why you want to be a photographer. What is it about it? If it's portraiture, what is it? Because, for example, portraiture, there's so many niches you can go. You could be like a street, like kind of style portraiture. You could be studio. You could be natural light. There's so many directions you could go. And I would say figure out your why, because that'll be your North Star. Where, again, being a freelancer, there's ebbs and flows. You're going to have the highs of getting all the work and you can't breathe. And then there's going to be the lows where you're going to be like, there's tumbleweeds in my inbox and why is no one calling me? You know your why and your passion. You can always go back to that. And so figure out what is it that you love. Because I always say to photographers, if you try to be everything to everyone, you are no one. We on our side, we are always looking for your unique, distinct visual eye. We're not looking for copycats. We're not looking for mid. We want you to, I always say, you are in photography or in some part of the creative field because you love it, and that passion will resonate in the work you're producing when you're on set. So I agree with Alan, where he found his niche, where he got that camp and he mastered it. He became like a master at it.
Yes.
And that's what we want. We want to hire someone who's mastered that technique, where on a set, you hope for the best, but you plan for the worst, where if something goes wrong, you know how to get the shot. Like, you have every possible scenario and backup plan from A to Z.
This I held up this roll of gaffer tape is something I found earlier because that's what's holding our webcam to the pole because I broke it on the way here. Yeah, something always goes wrong. And yeah, so that's something I try to tell people that, like, when you get a photo job, it's not the kind of job where you go in and you ask them what they want you to do, right? When you walk in the room as the photographer, right, you're the boss, right? You are kind of telling people where you want them, right?
So yeah, as a photographer, so if I'm hiring you, first I'm looking at your work. We are given a creative brief, no matter what. Like, if it's for a cover shoot with Beyonce, or
so hold on,
with Charlie XCX or something, right? For a brand.
Sorry, Karen. Let me interrupt you 1 second. Y'all know what a creative brief is, right? Some of y'all had intro to graphic design. The creative brief describes what it is that they want. It kind of tells you why you're there. I've said deliverable. Deliverable is the word. That's like what you're giving them at the end. And that's kind of what a creative brief is. And actually, you know what? If you could say, so you're the creative director, right?
Yes.
On a job. Can you talk about how the creative director and the creative brief work together? Sorry if I sidetracked you, but I want to make sure that
no worries. So basically, we are like, I'm like, as a creative director, photo creative director, we're working within a team where we're working. And we are handed, like, hey, for a brand campaign or a feature photo shoot or whatever, hey, we want to shoot this, and the creative team is given, like, this is what we're thinking. So they're coming to us because we're expert on our fields of the creative side of taking what whoever's requesting, like, hey, we are looking at this, we're looking to do this photo shoot. This is what we're thinking. So we're taking what they're thinking and then creating mood boards, and we're creating a creative direction and kind of the style we're thinking that this will be the best for the brand or for this cover shoot. That's the creative brief of what we're doing. And then once we get the sign off from the team, then the creative director, we're looking for artists that we feel that matches the style and tone from the creative brief that can deliver on this job. So as a photographer, I always say is, like, I think the temptation sometimes is like, I have to do everything. And I'm like, no, because every creative brief that I have been on, it is so super specific and different. And yes, there might be similarities. Like, when you're in a brand, you're playing in the sandbox of this is our brand guidelines. And this is, it has to be cohesive across different places. But usually there is a different tone and style going toward those different creative briefs. And so that's why I always tell photographers is that don't chase the trends. Don't find what you're passionate about and master it. Continue to grow and evolve that style, because we will find you and we will want to work with you because you will match a creative brief in a sense, or match a project that, like only you can do, and we get so excited in our end. Because at the end of the day, the creative departments, we just love looking at pretty photos. Down and simple. I love looking at websites. I love looking at how artists are creating, even if it challenges me, even if I might not particularly like, I don't really like it, but I understand the artistry and I can appreciate the artistry towards it. So always keep your unique personality towards it and try not to be trying to like look to the right or left and be like, well, this person is doing this and this person, that's them. Who are you?
Yeah, that's it's good you mentioned that, because I also teach some of the graphic design classes here, and as you might know, demographically, like about 70% of the creative industry is white people, about like 15 is Asian, like 10 is Hispanic, and 5 is other. And so what does that mean? Can you talk about where people fit?
I think it's the same kind of on our side as producer. When I started, I was like really there was hardly any Black photo editors, photo art directors. It is grown and there's still work to be done. But still, again, after 2020, I think people are now actively looking for more diversity, for more, different points of view. I always say at the end of the day, it will always come down to having a great portfolio. If you shoot or create design and your portfolio is up there, you're in the game. So that's why I always emphasize, like, always continue to grow your skill set, always continue to, have that growth mindset. And there's different ways. I always say that we find different people, and I always say, if you're in the photo field, there's a website or a website that for photographers called Diversified Photo, where you can put it was started by Brent Lewis. He is like a photo editor at the New York Times, along with another, I can't think of her, Andrea Wise, who's at Publica. But they started this website. This was like in 2016, and it's still up and running, where a lot of brands and companies will go and look for more diverse talent. And then there's also different like design sites like Black Artists Who Draw, all those kind of things where there's databases where people are actively looking for you and looking for diverse talent.
Yeah, I imagine maybe, Atlanta might be a different kind of animal, but it's a big world. Yes, please.
Yeah, what?
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear?
Yes, just speak up a little louder, please.
As far as when it comes to working with people like in the film industry, whether it be something that's in the industry or working with people who are more so independent, what does the collab look like with photographers? And then I had another question tied to that, but I'll start with that. What does the collab look like when it comes to working with photographers to create either a brand or a film or a short film that's coming out?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is that kind of collab look like?
So again, it's the same. It's like any kind of working relationship when, hey, let's say, for example, like Nike, and I'm looking for a filmmaker in, Atlanta who's like, okay, I have my creative brief, and kind of have the collab. And this is the same kind of with photographers. Like, hey, I'm looking at a creative brief, and okay, we have a shoot in Atlanta. We want to shoot somewhere local, and I'm looking at the creative brief, trying to find the right fit, and I'm reaching out to you. I'm like, okay, I looked at your portfolio. It's like, okay, this is amazing work, and I'm reaching out to you first and being like, hey, awesome work. We have this possible film, idea. Are you available for these dates? And then you may or may not have to, depending on like more brands, and especially tech, you will have to like usually sign an NDA first, a non-disclosure agreement, just because of trade secrets and all that stuff before we can move the conversation forward. But most of the time for editorial, you do not have to do that unless it's like a high priority celebrity for some reason or story. But and once that's like signed and taken care of, like we're diving in and making sure we're a good fit on both sides. I always say to creators, don't just assume like, you get this offer from a major thing. It's like, oh my God, this is my big dream. But if it doesn't feel right to you, you want to be hesitant and make sure, it's a good fit for you. and then we're looking on our side and making sure it's a good fit for us. And then let's say okay, we fit perfectly together, and then we're moving on to, making sure, we're signing the contracts, we're making sure everyone is, aware and on the same page creatively, and then we're having the shoot. And it's a collaboration on the shoot, right? We are hiring creatives, like Jason was saying, like, yeah, you are in charge. We don't have to micromanage you. We're hiring. This is why I always emphasize, like, making sure you are curating your strongest work on your site, because we are hiring you because we want you to do what you're doing here. Like, I'm putting together our mood board. I should be able to pick out 2 reels or 2 photos and be like, I like these lightings, and I want you to make a baby out of those lightings. And that's it. Like, combine those and be like, okay, I like this and this, but I mix them together where it comes to this perfect formula. You should know that backwards and forward. I shouldn't have to come and have to be like, micromanaging you, or like asking you, like, you don't know how to do that. So you are, like, in a sense, the creative is like in control in that domain, but at the same time, you're working in a collaborative space where I always say one of the biggest skills you can have is emotional intelligence and knowing how to read the room, because you can walk on set and the talent is pissed off. If you're able to get them back to get the shot, you will get hired over and over again. So knowing when to push and knowing when to back off, knowing how to pivot, be flexible to get what you need to final deliverables, you're golden.
Right. Yeah. There's so much more going on here than push a button on a machine, right? There's so much more happening.
Yeah.
So, do you have another question, or okay, go ahead.
Okay. So speaking of collaboration, for shoots and for editorial things, how do you find set designers and how do they come into play? Are there like websites where they belong? Do they belong to companies? And like, how do you incorporate that in general?
Okay, so usually for set designers, makeup artists, like all those people working with the photographers with the big production that needs it, it depends. Sometimes we will go to the photographer and if they have preferred people and if they're available. Other times we are working with agencies. Just like for photo agencies, there's agency for makeup artists, there's agency for designer. Sometimes they're freelance, And for our end, when we find people we like, everyone's system is different, but we will bookmark. We have our own kind of Rolodex of how we are categorizing people we're finding throughout our careers. Like, I have a whole Rolodex of people who have worked since the beginning of my career to now, of where I can just go and reference when I'm first, starting a project and seeing who could fit or not fit. But then we can do it the good old fashioned way of we're just Google searching or going down a rabbit hole on Instagram and Pinterest of finding new talent or finding people who are maybe the brief is so specific. We have to look for something so specific. And we can't, and that we don't find it in the agency, the artist, the photographer or artist or creative doesn't have any referrals or anything to go by.
Oh, is there another question about? Yes, sir.
As far as paying attention to your surroundings, everybody else is doing, did you go through that? And if you did, how long did it take you to kind of block out the noise, I guess you can say, and look at yourself, what you want?
I did, because again, I had no clue. Again, it wasn't taught in school. Like, I was taught like all photography stuff. So when I became a photo editor, I would just look at other photo producers and be basically copy or try to because again, I didn't know what I was doing until maybe 4 or 5 years in, where then I'm like, okay, I got the basics and technique and what I need to do. And then I started putting my, unique spin of this is how I, as a producer, this is how I am as an art director and how I create. And I always say for photographers, once you kind of figure out what you want to do. So for example, the food photographer, I always say, look at photographers doing what you ultimately want to be doing in your career, or look at creatives ultimately what they want to do for their career. Look at their site. Again, you're not trying to copy them, but you're looking at, this is kind of your competition. You're seeing how they're positioning themselves. You're seeing the kind of work they could have. You're seeing how they're presenting themselves that is getting the work that you ultimately want to do. Nothing is new under the sun. but you're just taking ideas from them. I always say it's like, okay, how are they laying it out? Are they making it easy to navigate? What are they? Maybe there's a terminology instead of food photography, they're using a different term, and you see that like across 3 or 4, websites, and you might want to play around and be like, let me try that term out. Work wise, you're looking at what they're doing, but then you're like, okay, everyone on these things have a burger shot. Okay, you're taking that burger shot and you're like, well, how am I remixing it and making it my unique burger shot that's unique to me? So it's like when you're starting out, you're gonna be tempted, which is fine. Or like, okay, they are doing this, so I need to do all this. That's normal and natural, but you have to transition into, okay, how am I putting my unique style? Because one of the things I run into photographers when we feel like make a mistake, I will be like, I'll look at their work and then I'll refer to another photographer because again, we're looking at a lot of photographers and, we remember, and I can mention, oh, your work is kind of derivative of this photographer, which you never want in a sense. You want to be like, I take inspiration and you can see an inspiration, but you don't want it to feel like, ooh, you're kind of doing the same thing, Maybe you're not using yellow like gel, you're just using blue, but it's like very strongly tied where now when I look at your work, I'm thinking about this other person that's doing the same thing.
And
So always like you're admiring and you're appreciating, but always like you're always in that studio or you're always out there, photographing outside, whatever, and you're developing your unique eye. And again, that's going to take time. You have to keep shooting. That's another one. If there's a takeaway, you always have to continue to shoot or create to get better at something, where it becomes secondhand nature.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm not sure. Well, it was what you mentioned earlier, and it was regarding knowing when to pivot and purchase and basically influence the people that you're working with. I'm a kind of, or at least knowing how to basically flow with the room, but flow with it in a better direction. Do you have any ideas, or do you have any advice on how to actually do that as a creator, like to flow with the creative process, but not necessarily make it difficult at the same time?
It's one of the things you have to be in a situation. You kind of have to just put yourself in positions when you're with people and test and iterate in a sense. There is no I can't tell you directly, but all I can say is when you're in these situations, I always say the worst photographers, they are not nice photographers who work and they get work and they're always going to get work because, they have privilege and all that stuff. But I always say the best photographers, I always work. These are the photographers who are not complaining. They're coming with solutions. So when you're going into a situation, always have a solution mindset of things are going to go wrong. And you're coming to people and you're like, hey, I know this is off, the light, it's not working. Hey, I have these 3 ideas. You know what I mean? And again, it's the same thing of when you're going into a room, you can kind of feel a vibe, and or when you're working with a subject per se, and you just okay, this is the idea that everyone has agreed on, but it's not working. You can feel it's not working. Being able to step in and talk to the subject, hey, being able to talk to them, be able to get them at ease, or say, hey, let's try this, or hey, you look really great in this, and showing them the pictures. It's one of those situational things you kind of have to kind of practice in situation to get better at it. But it's basically when you go into a room, you're just assessing you're meeting, I always tell photographers, meet everyone, talk to everyone, get to know everyone's name so they know who you are, making sure you're coming, hey, positive, solution oriented, hey, I want to get the best out of you. How you show up, I feel is a make or break for how successful the shoot is going to go. And it's everything. Again, like Jason said, you are kind of the pillar because you are in charge of getting this shot, right? You're going to have craziness around you, and being able to navigate different personalities. If you're able to do that, you're golden, because people will be like, I like working with you. And that's why a lot of people, I always tell photographers, I might not work with the best photographer, maybe necessary, but I'm eager to work with newer or greener, photographers because they are like, okay, they're willing to do whatever it takes to get it done. Versus someone who's like, I'm too good for this. I'm like, I do not want to work with you.
Was anybody here for Hazel Arms or talk last year? She said the same thing. If you're new and green and you're easy to work with, I want you to come and be on my set. That's fine. I don't need some jackass like causing trouble because we got the job. You almost word for word, you just repeated what another TV.
It's true. It is true. I always say it's like I would say if you like emotional intelligence and being solution oriented, that I always tell photographers, if you are easy and pleasant and get the shot, we will refer you up the moon to other people.
Yes.
So,
What is your advice regarding the photographers and field? Like, investing in your equipment or investing in yourself in investing in your creativity?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I'm sorry, it was a little muffled.
Sorry. She asked it like as a beginning photographer, right? Begin.
Mhm.
Like, is she putting her money into her equipment or into training or like where kind of like we're at the start of the road? What do we do?
Okay, so I always say first, because I always like to save time and money, and I'm a cheapo. And then, trust me, learn from like spending all this money on this equipment I don't even use anymore. I always say first, know your why, know what you want to be doing, okay? Because it's going to save you time and money. Once you know that, start making a mood board. Start making mood boards of kind of like what is your style, what is that aesthetic that's uniquely you on what you're doing, kind of like parallel to that. Say, for example, you are a beginner photographer and you want to be a portrait photographer. Start networking with other photographers. Start being on set, doing internships. Be in places where you're learning the business side of it. Because I don't think that's emphasized enough of like, okay, how am I putting estimates together? Contracts, understanding rates. Get with working people. Like if you want to be a producer, you want to be somewhere in film, you want to be a designer, start doing those internships at places where you're getting that experience which can double as your networking and getting your foot in the door for people to be able to refer you to other places. Now, with equipment, I'm a cheapo. I always say you get the bare minimum of what you need right now to do the job you need to do. So if you are a fine art photographer and you shoot 8x10 for some, and that's your thing, and that's what makes you money, obviously you're going to invest in an 8x10 camera. But for most people, I always say, what is the minimum equipment that you need to get whatever your aesthetic or what you do? And if you want to, and I always say, before you buy with the equipment to test it out, see if you can find it secondhand, cheaper. You do not have to be new all the time, unless it's something critical where it's like one of these things or a piece of equipment that's something unique or something, but only if it's truly necessary to get what you need for what you do. But I say what you, as a beginner, figure out what you want to be, ultimately want to do, and it can change, but you need a starting point. Understand who's in this field, what's in the market right now. Get connected with people doing what you ultimately want to be doing and trying to get internships or beginning entry level positions. And so you're networking and you're talking to people in your industry of what you want to be doing and getting good business and save advice on that. And then equipment wise, only getting right now what you need bare minimum to do an awesome job. You don't have to have all the bells and whistles. I've seen photographers literally with 35 millimeter camera, you know what I mean? And they're doing, that. They don't got like these big high fancy equipment and stuff like that. And if they do, because I've been on these shoots, they're renting them. They don't own. So I'm cheap. And so I'm like, if you're like, oh, I really need to try this new light or the thing, rent it first and work with it and see if it's like actually something you need or you would use all the time that makes it worth the investment. Because nothing like where you buy something and you use it like one or two times and it's just sitting there collecting dust.
That's true. Yeah, I always had a kind of idea that I do a job and buy a thing, do a job and buy a thing. And so make a decision based on what it is that you're working on.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
What do the highs and lows look like mentally and working with other people? And at this point, have you ever wanted to quit or like take long hiatus?
I always say, it just, okay, so from my side, okay, and I'm just using from my side of perspective, and then I'll tell you kind of what photography for my friend. But from my side as a producer, as a producer I'm working in corporate, basically, 9 to 5, like, and then sometimes I freelance, But most of the time I've been working in corporate. And so on my side, again, I always say from being an art director, a creative director, a photo director, or a photo producer, you have to love this job because it is like turn and burn. It is like hustle culture to the 100 degree. And it's like, I've had things where I've had things where, yes, okay, it was, oh my God, I don't know how I survived this. But the reward of just being at the cover or a billboard, that is my reward. But then I've had shoots where it has gone horribly wrong. The people were terrible. And it's like, I always say on our side, we're never going to burn bridges, but it's not like I'm going to call you the next day or I'm going to look at your emails and I don't ever want to see those images again. I haven't had to take a break, but I will say I have had burnout a couple of times. And it's just the nature of the beast of production. I would say on the photographer side is a little different because unless you're working full time as a photographer, and I always say the pros and cons of, if you're full time as a photographer somewhere, you got that kind of steady paycheck from unemployment. But then at the cons, because I've seen it at the companies I work, you shoot everything. And I mean, everything. You think you're shooting this one thing. And I'm like, hey, and I'm telling the photographer, you need to shoot the, passport photo for the CEO. I know it's not part of your job, but like you're shooting that and other things, and you're tripled and booked, double booked. But as a freelance photographer, it's even kind of like you just never know because photographers always tell me it's like, Karen, I'm booked and I can't take a vacation. And then they'll come like 2 months later and say, Karen, where's all the jobs? It's kind of dried up. And it's the nature of the economy and just the time of year of like when things are busier than others. With businesses, you have to think in quarters, and usually 4th quarter, people are like, we're shutting down. Those books are closed. We're not spending as much versus like spring and summer where we have budget and we are spending. So always keeping in mind as a creative that I always say, get in the habit of setting boundaries, get in the habit of if you're going freelance, you're not like 9 to 5, knowing that there is going to be, busy times and slow times, and how do you fill the in between? And making sure you're taking time, and it's the hardest thing as a freelancer. I know for me, when I was freelancing for a bit, to take breaks and focus on self-care. Because being burnt out as a photographer and then trying to, create your best work rarely ends with success.
Yeah, that's true. I worked in like cubicle photography for a long time, and health insurance is great. I love having health insurance, but at some point, it just doesn't. I'm not cube shaped, and I had to go somewhere else. But we have to be comfortable with the float right before the air catches us. Anybody? Yes.
What platform would you recommend to build your portfolio? What would you recommend to build?
What platform? Whatever works for you. I always say pick the platform that you can update regularly. And it's not a pain. Like I use Squarespace. I've used Squarespace from the beginning because it's just easy to, in the back end, for me to just put in a portfolio, take out images. Some people like Wix because they like to customize. Like I don't customize. I hired a designer who could do that for me. Like for me, I need it. But before I hire like my latest iteration for my website for Black Visual Queen, I just had a straight for my portfolio. I just had literally a straight, and I'm still on it, Squarespace, and it was just literally a portfolio site where it's like, here's everything I've done. Kept it simple. So I always say goes with equipment, platform, whatever your like tools. It's whatever. It's what I always say. Pick whatever works for you and what you need to do. Because some people are like lazy, like I just need something that I can just plop and play. I'm not looking to, design something fancier and thing. I just like, okay, here's a gallery, thanks. I'm just going to put photos up. I'm not looking for anything fancy. Some people want more control and they're like, okay, here's sites like Wix where, okay, I can, like, for the middle scene or second, whatever, like, just like, customize to no end and they enjoy it. But for me, I'm a very low maintenance person. So anything that is low maintenance, that is the best. So that's what I would suggest, like researching and like kind of playing around. I know a lot of places, platforms will have where you can, create a site for free. I don't think, and you may be able to publish it for a little bit and maybe not, but at least you can be playing around and see, is this something that I can maintain, and not be, oh, it's been over, because I've worked with photographers for web editors. Like, it's been over 5 years since I've updated this because I hate my website. I hate the back end. And it's like, that is not a website that you should be using or like a platform.
You mentioned also Pinterest. Like, where are you at as a creative director? Like, what Pinterest, Instagram you mentioned?
Right.
I
When
would
you-
say is like we all have different ways. So how we will source photographers first, I would say the number one for like source is referrals. Referrals in our team. Referrals from, we have our like Facebook groups and stuff around and be like, hey, do you have any recommendation for a photographer in Atlanta? Then I always say the second thing is like Instagram. I always say as a photographer, love or hate Meta, like Instagram is still a thing for us. Like, because visually we can still see things that should correlate to your website. I always say your website, you should always have a website. Websites are not going away because when we're trying to pick between photographers, we're sending your website to stakeholders who also weigh into this decision. So I always say, always have a website that is your home base, and then social, I always say, make it easy to find you. I always say stuff, like I said, Instagram's still a big thing. And this dark horse, I always say, is Pinterest, because sometimes I'm on Pinterest and I'm like, I'm looking for this kind of type of image, and I go into a rabbit hole, and if I see an image, and if the photographer has tagged themselves in it and linked it to their website, then that takes me to your website. And then I found you.
You said internships too. Where do those come from?
So there's many ways. It depends on what you want to do. So I always say it depends. Like, as a first, if you're like, I always say the first thing is always other photographers, photographers of like trying to be their, photo assistant or PA, something like that. What about, if you're interested like in film and stuff, like production houses and stuff like that, and interning and, or like, PA and stuff like that. Companies always usually have some type of internship program. Also with, publications. Always look on, and then you always can look on LinkedIn. And also Indeed as well, that will post internships and stuff like that. Or probably your campus may have like a place where you can go and look for things, but you kind of have to get creative. And this is why I always go back to kind of figure out what you ultimately want to be doing and start then doing research in the industry that you want to be working and what's around Atlanta that you could be doing. And I always say it's nice to go to school. Like, I'm a nerd, so I went to school because I like learning the history of photography and all that stuff. But getting your foot in the door and having that experience will trump, education sometimes. And there's a lot of people who I meet and they're like, I didn't go to school. One day I just started interning as a PA, and now they're in the position they are because they just worked their way up. So I always say it's good to have that balance of having that knowledge of education. I will never knock that. I always love it. I'm a nerd. But also getting your foot, starting to knock on doors and starting to get yourself into the industry that you ultimately want to be doing. So as if you want to be a designer, what are these design firms, ad agencies? They usually have internships or something, or maybe an entry level job that you could be doing.
Question?
And that's helping you build your portfolio, but also introducing you to other people that, like I said, can refer you.
In the beginning, is it
Mhm.
reliable to just focus on the photography, what you're trying to do, or should you have something on the side in case?
I will always advocate, and this is like in my book that's coming out, I always advocate when you're first starting out, you probably want to start with a 9-to-5 job because you want to be, I always say I rather you be financially secure versus where I've worked with photographers where they're like 10, 15 years in their thing and like, oh my God, this is my only thing and I have to take any job. It's like, I never want that. I say when you're starting out, have a job, maybe a full-time job. Maybe you can get it adjacent to something in photography or something like that. But I always advocate have a job where you feel financially secure so you can build up a runway. Then build up your photography on the side while you're at this job. And then you get to a point where, okay, maybe like, okay, I'm starting to get more gigs. I've saved up, it's been 2 years or maybe 1 year, whatever that is for you, where, okay, let's try this full time, freelance for a year, because I know I have enough to get me through a year without having to tap into emergency funds and stuff like that. And I'm not feeling like because again, when you're a freelance photographer or creative, you're not having the luxury of unless you're working contract, but you're not having the luxury of having a weekly or bi-weekly check. So it's going to be, and when you're freelance, you're not getting paid right away. There's net 30, 60, and 90 days where after you're done with the job, you might get an advance up front, maybe, but it's rare. Once you turn in your invoice after the job is complete, then that's when that net 30, 90, 60, whatever kicks in. So keep that in mind. So I always say advocate when you're starting out. I would have a job. So your things are getting paid, bills are getting paid, and you're not feeling like I have to take this job to survive.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather you feel financially secure and stable. And therefore then the creativity, you have to be more creative because you're not worried about, paying bills. That's just my advice. And this is all just my advice, suggestions. You do what you feel is right for you.
When it comes to starting up your photography business, what advice would you give on what steps to take as far as like setting rate and like?
That might be a good time for you to talk. Mention, I bet this is in your book too.
Yes.
All right.
So when you're starting out your business, I always say, and again, you're going to hear it sounds like a broken record. First, understand what kind of photography do you want to do, because there's so many different realms. There's retail photography, which is basically you're working with clients that's like wedding photography, that's like family portraiture. Is it editorial photography? So you're working with. Go ahead.
Street and lifestyle.
Street and lifestyle for what kind? Like, is it retail purposes of like you're working with like clients like directly, or is it street and lifestyle for editorial brands, like, or is it commercial where you want like more advertising or something like that? Because there's different ways you approach it on that. So okay,
like an editorial kind of thing,
and then
street and lifestyle style.
Okay. Like, so for editorial, so how I would approach this is first, what is that style? What is that lifestyle aesthetic you're going for? Figuring out what are the publications and brands, places you want to be photographing, doing an audit. Because first before you're starting your business, you want to make sure that there's a market for what you are trying to do is out there and people are hiring for it. Once you kind of figure that out, then you're building your portfolio to attract those clients that you're wanting. Then after you've built that portfolio and your website's like amazing, then you're starting to network with these clients to get jobs, doing portfolio reviews, cold emailing, and to set up a time maybe to meet and chat with the creatives that are making these decisions and stuff like that. That's basically it. It's just like kind of like I always say, like an editorial, it's like about the long game and staying on top of mind with people. But really first getting clear of like what exactly of lifestyle you want to do, because there's so many different things in lifestyle. Because in lifestyle, I always say lifestyle, it's like people, places, things, but then some people can do like I like shooting hospitality. So they're shooting hotels and all that kind of thing. And then there's lifestyle of like Southern living or Condé Nast Traveler, you know what I mean? Of shooting, portraits and restaurants and places and, in the slice of life. Kind of figuring out like kind of the steps I would take is what you're kind of wanting to do, building a portfolio around that it's going to be attracting to those places you're wanting to shoot, and then to network and market yourself. And put yourself out there.
Okay, so my God, there's a photographer actually. Her name is Krishana King. I don't know if you've heard her before. Visuals like so. I am back able to take the opportunity to internship with her this summer and things of that nature.
Yeah,
Right.
I love it.
She's in New York too, so that's a big one.
Yes.
And she already has her
Yes.
in the door between Converse.
And take that, and when you're entering, take that time while you're out there. Start networking for yourself. Start building your own network reaching out to different people, building your portfolio, like taking full advantage.
And you're in Atlanta, right?
I'm in LA.
Oh,
She's Los Angeles. You got a question?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Is it good to like have like two niches? Like I'm in sports, but I also want to be in lifestyle as well.
I wouldn't say those are two niches. I would say I always say and this is why I always emphasize research photographers doing what you want to do. I would say it's not necessarily two niches. I believe I would say, okay, maybe you like the lifestyle aesthetic. So how does that look when you shoot that for sports, unless you want it to look differently? And then how does, because I always say the most successful photographers, they shoot everything in a sense. Not like everything, but when you look at their photography, you'll see people who are like, they love portraiture, but they have developed and honed down niches. This is why I say develop your unique eye, where, okay, I shoot portraiture, but I want to also shoot still life. How does that look like how I shoot portraiture? How does that look like for still life? So it still feels consistent. Does that make sense? So for you, I would say, okay, you want to shoot sports, but you want to shoot lifestyle. What does that mean? And maybe it's more of, I'm shooting sports in more of a lifestyle aesthetic that then it would still match me shooting portraiture or architecture or places. Does that make sense?
Go ahead.
My dad has a camera. It's not the highest quality, but it kind of looks like he took the photo in 2005. Like there's a bit of rain to it. It looks a little old, almost this nostalgic feeling. Have you ever done anything like that in your works, or is it all just like high focus with the Photoshop?
No, that's why I said start researching photographers. Like there was for Netflix, there was for a reunion, they wanted to hire a photographer and they wanted a look that looked like it was shot from a Polaroid, but they didn't use a Polaroid. They just found a photographer to shoot it and to manipulate it like that. There was a case at a movie set where it was like it's set in the Civil War time, and they wanted to look like tintype, template, and stuff like that. But they didn't go and look at, go and get it and made a tintype. They just found someone a photographer who could. This is why I say it's having that unique aesthetic and being able to do something, because they just hired a photographer who was able to take amazing pictures and be able to manipulate and post to make it look like photos from that era.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I said, I recommend this for all photographers. Start looking at people, creatives that are doing what you want to be doing, and just other people, and seeing how other photographers. I say you look at event photography, and there's people who shoot straight Polaroids. That's their aesthetic. They just shoot straight Polaroids. But when I know I'm going to hire them, that's what I'm supposed to be getting.
You know what you're going to get. And CR, you?
creative with cheating because as a photographer, what you do, Richard, first what you do and what we're looking for. So you actually advise when it comes to that. Because I
would say if you're having creative blocks, you're probably trying to force something. So I would recommend taking a step back, go and do something else like you love and find passionate. So maybe it's like I like running. For me, I like to run, and so that just gets things out of me. Take a step back, do something that you love, that's something passionate, and then maybe it's like, okay, I'm feeling creative blocks in fashion or something. Shoot something else, just for fun. Play around, experiment, and usually that those juices will start rubbing up again. But I always say immediately when you feel like you're forcing it and it's becoming like, okay, it's work, and it's like you feeling that friction, take a step back, take a break from it, walk away, do something like do some puzzles, whatever it is, or do something, and then come back to it.
then what if
So you'll see it in fresher eyes. But
then what if it's an assignment and I can't just put it away?
it's one of those things where it's like, okay, this is good, because what happens if you feel like, think of it if you're a job and then all of a sudden you are creatively blocked. How would you work around it? Would you change the lighting? Would you change something about it? Would you, look at it in a different way, kind of like a different perspective than you're trying to look at it now? Like, I have to do this, but maybe, okay, if it's an assignment, then maybe, okay, let me try it this way. Let me try it that way. You know what I mean? And seeing if anything is breaking loose.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank y'all.
Wow, Karen, you gave us a whole hour. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And so, you've got the Photo Hustle book about this, basically what we're talking about now, coming out in a month or so. Man,
Yeah.
congratulations. That's a big.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. This has been fun.
Yeah. You feel more informed? Good. Well, thank you. Where's the camera go? There it is. Hi.
Yeah.
It's good to see you in person again. And yeah, we'll correspond, and I appreciate you making the time today. Thank
All
you.
right. Y'all
Okay.
have a great rest of your day.
Bye-bye. Thanks.